Frankenstein, the Alien Spy, by Johnson Davies. Chapter 1. The Birth of the Monster. The War Council of Dresdely Prime convened in silence, their minds tethered across the neural lattice in a chamber carved from metal rock and sealed against time. 12 commanders, each representing a quadrant of the Empire, reviewed the intelligence gathered from Earth, a planet rich in resources, fractured in governance, and vulnerable to coordinated incursion. The invasion directive had been authorized, but before deployment, the Council required a single operative, an embedded scout capable of passing as human, gathering first-hand data, and identifying strategic weaknesses in Earth's defense infrastructure. The mission demanded precision. The operative would be alone, without support, and exposed to a culture defined by emotional volatility and unpredictable rituals. Agent Varloff stood before them, his posture exact, his expression neutral. He had completed the trials of flesh, endured the psychological simulations of Earth's social environments, and survived the empathy gauntlet, a test designed to measure his ability to mimic human emotional responses without internal compromise. He had been selected from over 2,000 candidates. "Agent Varloff," said Commander Keltrax, his voice transmitted through the lattice in a low, harmonic frequency. "You will be our instrument. You will observe, record, and report. You will not engage unless ordered. Do you understand the parameters?" "I do," Varloff replied. The transformation process began immediately. Varloff was escorted to the bioforge, where his physiology was reconstructed to match human anatomy. His internal systems were shielded against Earth's atmosphere, his neural interface calibrated to interpret human language and behavior. His skin was synthesized from adaptive polymers designed to mimic human epidermal texture and tone. The scientists responsible for his transformation consulted the Central Archive for anatomical reference. They requested a complete blueprint for how to build a human being. The archive responded with a file labeled Frankenstein, 1818, Shelley. It was flagged as historical literature, but the metadata had been corrupted during a recent system purge. The warning was missed. The scientists interpreted the document as a foundational guide. They followed its descriptions precisely, assembling Varloff's body with reinforced stitching, bolted joints, and exaggerated proportions. The result was anatomically functional, but visually grotesque. No one questioned the outcome. The mission was scheduled. The infiltration vessel was prepared. Varloff was briefed on Earth's seasonal calendar, cultural norms, and linguistic patterns. He was informed that the month was October and that human behavior might be affected by regional rituals. He was instructed to ignore distractions and focus on military reconnaissance. The vessel launched from Dresdely's outer orbit and entered Earth's atmosphere cloaked in quantum fog. No satellite detected its descent. No radar registered its presence. It hovered above a civilian park in the Midwestern United States, chosen for its proximity to urban infrastructure and low security density. Varloff stood in the teleport chamber, his body stabilized, his mission parameters locked. "Begin infiltration," the AI intoned. He stepped into the beam. Moments later, he was on Earth. The grass was damp. The air was cool. Children played nearby. Adults conversed. Varloff scanned the environment, identified no immediate threats, and began his approach. He extended his arms in greeting. The reaction was immediate. Screams, panic. Children fled. Adults grabbed their offspring and ran. One woman collapsed. Another threw a beverage container. Varloff paused, recalibrated his translator, and attempted verbal communication. No one responded. He turned toward the city, unaware that the archive had betrayed him, and that his mission had already begun to unravel. Chapter 2. Integration. Varloff's descent left a residue of static in his neural interface. The teleportation beam had deposited him precisely as calculated, within a civilian zone, unarmed, unguarded, and saturated with ambient noise. His internal systems recalibrated to Earth's gravity, atmospheric filters engaged, thermal regulators adjusted to the chill of early autumn. He moved without hesitation. The city rose ahead, a lattice of concrete, glass, and motion. Vehicles passed in rhythmic intervals. Pedestrians flowed along sidewalks, faces obscured by masks, makeup, and synthetic fabrics. Varloff's visual processor flagged anomalies, exaggerated facial features, artificial wounds, and grotesque distortions. His threat assessment algorithms spiked, then stabilized. No hostility detected, no weapons drawn. He entered the urban grid. His mission parameters were clear: locate a data terminal, extract information on human defense infrastructure, and identify strategic vulnerabilities. He scanned storefronts, signage, and public kiosks. Language translation modules rendered the symbols into readable syntax. Most were irrelevant, advertisements for seasonal goods, entertainment, and ritual paraphernalia. One terminal stood inside a retail structure labeled Party Supply Depot. Varloff approached, triggering the automatic doors. Inside, the environment was saturated with visual noise: plastic skeletons, rubber masks, and bins of multicolored confections. A humanoid employee approached, smiling. "Nice costume," she said. "You here for the contest?" Varloff did not respond. His translator flagged the phrase as non-operational. He moved past her toward the terminal. The interface was primitive, touch-based, unsecured. He accessed the system and searched for military installations, weapons registries, and law enforcement databases. The results were filtered through commercial algorithms. He received listings for costume shops, haunted attractions, and candy distributors. He paused. The archive had failed him. The cultural data was corrupted. His appearance, intended to mimic human anatomy, was being interpreted as festive, not foreign. He was not infiltrating. He was participating. A child approached, holding a plastic bucket shaped like a pumpkin. "You're Frankenstein," the child said. "You're supposed to say trick or treat." Varloff scanned the phrase. No tactical relevance, no embedded code. He remained silent. The child dropped a piece of candy into his hand and walked away. Varloff exited the building. Outside, the city pulsed with ritual energy. He passed groups of civilians in coordinated disguises. Some carried weapons, replicas, non-functional. Others rode vehicles modified to resemble creatures or machines. The air was thick with synthetic fog and amplified sound. He activated his communicator. "Command, this is Varloff. Civilian behavior is non-standard. Cultural distortions are interfering with mission objectives, requesting recalibration. Static." Then a response. "Proceed. Adapt intelligence required." Varloff terminated the link. He turned toward the central district, where the density of human activity increased. His systems recorded every interaction, every gesture, every anomaly. He was alone, misidentified, and surrounded by a species that had weaponized confusion. The mission continued, but the parameters were no longer stable. Chapter 3. Interference. Varloff moved through the city's arterial grid with calculated precision. His internal systems mapped pedestrian flow, vehicular rhythm, and electromagnetic interference. Surveillance nodes were sparse, clustered around financial institutions and transit hubs. No military presence detected, no visible enforcement units. He identified a public data terminal embedded in a transit kiosk. The interface was analog, touchscreen, unsecured, designed for civilian use. He accessed it. Search parameters. defense installations, weapons registries, command hierarchies. The results were fragmented. The terminal redirected him to entertainment listings, seasonal events, and commercial promotions. Keywords like arsenal and tactical returned costume shops and themed attractions. One entry offered zombie survival training at a local mall. Another advertised apocalypse paintball. Varloff paused. He recalibrated his query, filtering for government infrastructure. The results narrowed to City Hall, a fire station, and a museum exhibit titled War Machines of the 20th Century. No active military data, no strategic assets. He terminated the session. The distortion was systemic. Civilian access to defense information was restricted, and cultural overlays had corrupted the semantic framework. His translator flagged multiple terms as ambiguous: monster, Frankenstein, trick or treat. None matched tactical lexicons. He moved deeper into the city. Crowds thickened. The air carried synthetic fog and amplified sound. Civilians wore exaggerated disguises, some grotesque, others absurd. His threat assessment algorithms fluctuated, unable to distinguish ritual from reality. A group of adolescents approached, dressed in paramilitary gear. One carried a replica rifle. Another wore a mask resembling a decomposed face. They encircled Varloff, laughing. "Dude, your costume is insane," one said. "You going to the parade?" Varloff remained silent. They moved on. Varloff activated his communicator. "Command, this is Varloff. Civilian behavior is non-standard. Semantic distortion is interfering with data acquisition. Requesting tactical overlay." Static. Then, "Continue observation. Do not engage." He terminated the link. His neural interface began to fragment. Emotional simulation modules, designed to mimic human affect, registered dissonance. He was surrounded by a species that celebrated distortion, weaponized ambiguity, and ritualized fear. His appearance, intended to be neutral, was being interpreted as symbolic. He was not infiltrating. He was being absorbed. Varloff turned toward the museum listed in the terminal's results. It was the only location flagged with historical military relevance. He would proceed there. He would extract what he could. But the mission was no longer going as planned, and the substance beneath it was beginning to crack. Chapter 4. The Exhibit. The museum stood at the edge of the civic district, its facade weathered by time and neglect. A banner hung across the entrance: War Machines of the 20th Century, Special Halloween Exhibit. Varloff scanned the structure. No active security. Civilian density low. The building's internal network was accessible through public terminals. It was the only flagged location with historical military relevance. He entered. Inside, the lighting was dim, punctuated by flickering projectors and ambient sound loops, marching drums, distant gunfire, static-laced broadcasts. The exhibits were arranged chronologically, each section devoted to a different conflict. Varloff moved slowly, recording visuals, scanning placards, and extracting metadata. World War I, trench warfare, bolt-action rifles, chemical agents. World War II, mechanized armor, aerial bombardment, nuclear escalation. Cold War, deterrence theory, proxy conflicts, psychological operations. His neural interface struggled to contextualize the data. The weapons were obsolete. The tactics were ceremonial. The conflicts were framed as narratives, stories of valor, sacrifice, and ideology. The museum was not a repository of strategic knowledge. It was a monument to memory. He reached the final exhibit. A mock command center had been constructed: plastic consoles, blinking lights, mannequins in fatigues. A sign read, "Halloween Tactical Simulation. Test your skills." A group of children played nearby, pressing buttons and shouting orders. One wore a mask resembling Varloff's own face, stitched skin, bolted neck, exaggerated brow. Varloff froze. He approached the simulation console and accessed its interface. The system was gamified, designed for entertainment, not analysis. He bypassed the visual layer and accessed the underlying code. It was fragmented, derivative, built on outdated logic trees and randomized outcomes. No usable intelligence. He terminated the session. A museum attendant approached, clipboard in hand. "Great costume," she said. "You part of the exhibit?" Varloff did not respond. She smiled awkwardly and walked away. He turned toward the exit. Outside, the city pulsed with ritual energy. The cultural distortion was not incidental, it was systemic. The archive had failed. The mission parameters were misaligned. His appearance, his behavior, his objectives, none matched the reality of Earth's civilian infrastructure. He activated his communicator. "Command, this is Varloff. Tactical information gathering unsuccessful. Civilian systems corrupted by ritual overlays. Requesting reassessment. Static." Then, "Prepare to return to orbital vessel for full debriefing." Varloff went to the prearranged extraction point and was immediately beamed aboard the spacecraft. After relaying what limited information he had, he was giving his new orders. Return to Earth and await instructions. Chapter 5. Invasion. The signal arrived at dusk. Varloff stood beneath a flickering street lamp, his neural interface pulsing with encrypted transmission. The message was brief, unambiguous. Phase 2 authorized. Prepare for ground deployment of troops. Varloff paused. Phase 2 was invasion. The mission would continue. But Earth was not what they thought, and he was no longer certain what he had become. He did not respond. The directive required no confirmation. His role was no longer observational. He was now the forward element of a planetary incursion. Above the cloud line, the invasion fleet broke orbit. 6 transport vessels descended in formation, their hulls sheathed in adaptive camouflage. Each carried over 1,000 infantry soldiers, engineered for rapid deployment, urban suppression, and environmental resilience. The fleet's command algorithms had calculated Earth's defensive posture as fragmented, under-coordinated, and vulnerable to shock incursion. Varloff moved toward the designated landing zone. It was an abandoned commercial district on the city's southern edge, chosen for its infrastructure density and minimal military presence. The streets were quiet. The first transport breached the atmosphere. Its descent triggered no alarms. No satellites registered its entry. It hovered above the district, releasing its payload in staggered intervals. Infantry units deployed in silence, their armor refracting ambient light, their weapons calibrated for non-ballistic suppression. Varloff watched them land. He recognized the formation, standard perimeter sweep, followed by urban insertion. The units moved with precision, scanning for resistance, marking entry points. But something was wrong. The air had shifted. A low-pressure front swept through the district. Wind picked up. Discarded debris scattered. The temperature dropped. Then came the rain. It began as a mist, light, cold, unremarkable. But within seconds, the first soldier collapsed. His armor hissed, his limbs liquefied. The synthetic musculature dissolved into translucent sludge. Varloff stepped back. Another soldier fell, then another. The rain intensified. The street shimmered with melting forms. The invasion force, designed for tactical superiority, was disintegrating. He activated his communicator. "Command, this is Varloff. Environmental incompatibility detected. Infantry units are non-viable. Requesting abort. Static." Then, "Confirmed. Mission failure. Fleet withdrawing." Varloff watched the transports ascend, their hulls trailing vapor. No extraction order was issued, no contingency activated. He was left behind. The rain continued. He stood alone in the street, surrounded by puddles that had once been soldiers. Civilians passed nearby, laughing, unaware. A child pointed at him and waved. Varloff did not move. The mission was over. He was no longer an operative. He was abandoned and left out in the rain. Chapter 6. Debris. The rain had stopped. Varloff stood in the center of the street, surrounded by the remnants of the invasion force. The translucent puddles that had once been soldiers shimmered under the street lights, slowly seeping into the storm drains. No trace of their weapons remained, no signal from the fleet, no extraction order. He was alone. His internal systems ran diagnostics, environmental compatibility, stable, neural integrity, degraded. Mission status, terminated. The communicator was silent. The fleet had withdrawn. Dresdali Prime had severed contact. Varloff moved slowly through the district, his footsteps echoing against wet pavement. Civilians passed nearby, laughing, unaware. Their faces were painted, their clothes distorted, their rituals continued. He entered an alley and sat beneath a rusted fire escape. His neural interface replayed the final transmission. Mission failure, fleet withdrawing. He had been trained for infiltration, not survival. His body was engineered for short-term deployment, not long-term habitation. His identity was constructed from corrupted data. His appearance was a misinterpretation. His purpose, gather intelligence, lead invasion, was obsolete. He activated his internal archive. The Shelley file appeared again. Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. He opened it. The text unfolded in fragments, descriptions of creation, rejection, isolation. He read slowly, absorbing the language. The creature had been assembled from parts. It had been misunderstood. It had been abandoned. Varloff paused. He was not the creature. He was the error. He closed the archive. The city pulsed beyond the alley. Lights, sound, movement. He scanned for shelter, for data terminals, for any structure that could offer concealment. His systems flagged a warehouse 3 blocks east, unoccupied, structurally stable. He moved toward it. Inside, the air was dry. Dust coated the floor. Broken crates lined the walls. He found a corner and sat, powering down non-essential systems. His neural interface dimmed. His body cooled. He was no longer an operative. He was a remnant of a failed incursion, a misidentified entity in a culture that had absorbed him as fiction. Outside, the city prepared for celebration. Inside, Varloff waited. Not for orders, but for meaning. The warehouse contained remnants of human activity, broken crates, discarded packaging, a rusted terminal. He powered it on. The interface was primitive, unsecured. He accessed local networks, searching for patterns, for structure, for meaning. The results were fragmented. News feeds saturated with ritual violence, commercial saturation, and cultural distortion. Civilian behavior driven by seasonal cycles, emotional triggers, and symbolic gestures. The month was October. The ritual was Halloween. His appearance, stitched skin, bolted neck, exaggerated frame, was being interpreted as celebratory. He was not feared. He was fictional. Varloff terminated the session. He stood and moved toward the warehouse entrance. The city beyond was alive with movement, children in masks, adults in disguise, music, laughter, light. He stepped into the street. No one screamed, no one ran. A group of civilians passed him, waving, offering candies. He accepted them without response. His systems recorded the interaction. No hostility, no suspicion, no recognition. He was not a threat. He was a symbol. Varloff turned away from the crowd and walked into the city's interior. His mission was over. His identity was unstable. His purpose was undefined. but he was still operational, and Earth was still watching. Chapter 7. Observer. Varloff had not powered down. His systems remained in passive scan mode, absorbing ambient data from the city beyond. Civilian behavior patterns, linguistic drift, seasonal rituals, each fragment recorded, indexed, and cross-referenced against the corrupted archive. The results were inconclusive. Earth's culture was not linear. It was recursive, symbolic, and emotionally volatile. Its systems were not governed by logic but by myth. Its rituals did not serve tactical functions but psychological ones. The month of October was saturated with contradiction. Fear celebrated, death mocked, monsters embraced. Varloff stood at the threshold of the warehouse and watched. Children passed in disguise. Adults followed, laughing. The city pulsed with artificial light and synthetic sound. He recorded gestures, expressions, exchanges. He analyzed the semiotics of masks, costumes, and offerings. He mapped the architecture of a ritual designed to invert reality. He was no longer gathering tactical intelligence. He was studying meaning. His neural interface flagged a pattern: repetition, variation, absorption. Earth's culture did not reject anomalies, it repurposed them. His appearance, once a liability, had become a symbol. He was not feared, he was familiar. He moved through the city unnoticed. At a public plaza, he stood near a fountain and observed. A child approached, holding a plastic bucket. "You're the Frankenstein guy," the child said. "You're supposed to be scary." Varloff scanned the phrase. No threat. No deception. He nodded once. The child offered him a candy bar. He accepted it. Nearby, a group of civilians gathered around a display screen. A broadcast played. News segments, advertisements, fragments of entertainment. One segment featured a costumed figure resembling Varloff. The headline read, "Classic Monster Returns. Halloween Icon Reimagined." He watched in silence. His image had been absorbed into the cultural archive, not as a threat, not as a mistake, as a myth. He activated his communicator. No signal. He was no longer connected to command. He was no longer executing a mission. He was no longer defined by origin. Varloff turned away from the screen and walked into the crowd. His systems recorded every interaction, every gesture, every anomaly. He was not infiltrating. He was not invading. He was observing. Chapter 8. Reframing. The city's pulse had slowed. The ritual reached its apex the night before. Streets flooded with masked civilians, synthetic fog, and amplified sound. Now the remnants lingered, discarded wrappers, broken props, and fading symbols. Varloff moved through it like a shadow, recording the aftermath. His systems had stabilized, environmental compatibility confirmed, neural coherence partial, emotional simulation active but unpredictable. The corrupted archive had been purged. He no longer relied on external directives. He no longer waited for orders. He was reconstructing. In the absence of command, Varloff had begun to interpret. Not data, not tactics, meaning. He studied the symbols left behind, painted faces, plastic bones, ritual offerings. He mapped their recurrence, their distortion, their absorption. Earth did not reject anomalies. It reframed them. He was not feared. He was familiar. At a public library, he accessed civilian archives, literature, history, mythology. He searched for patterns, figures misidentified, absorbed, repurposed, the creature from Shelley's novel, the misunderstood outsider, the monster mistaken for myth. He read slowly. He studied the language of transformation. He began to write. Not reports, not tactical summaries, observations, reflections, fragments of experience. He recorded his descent, his misidentification, the collapse of the invasion. He documented the silence of command, the absorption into ritual, the reframing of identity. He was no longer Varloff of Dresden Prime. He was the witness to abandonment. Outside, the city prepared for another cycle. The symbols would return, the masks would reappear, the myth would persist. Inside, Varloff continued to write, not to complete a mission, but to leave a record. Chapter 9. Recognition. Laura Reynolds had never believed in monsters. She was a graduate student in anthropology, specializing in myth adaptation and cultural distortion. Her thesis explored how ancient archetypes, outsiders, shapeshifters, revenants, were reabsorbed into modern rituals. Halloween, she argued, was not a celebration of fear, but a rehearsal of control, a way to dress the unknown in plastic and laughter. She had been watching the city for weeks, documenting costumes, mapping rituals, interviewing participants. Most were predictable: zombies, vampires, corporate mascots. But one figure stood out, tall, silent, unblinking, always alone, always watching. She saw him first, near the plaza fountain. Children approached him. Adults waved. He never spoke. He never broke character. She assumed he was a performer, until she saw him again, and again. Always the same, always precise. She began recording. His movements were too consistent, his posture too rigid, his silence too complete. She reviewed her footage, frame by frame. His skin did not flex, his eyes did not blink, his breath did not fog. She ran facial recognition against public databases. No match. She searched costume forums, performance art collectives, immersive theater groups. Nothing. She watched him enter the public library. He stayed for hours. No books checked out. No terminal usage logged. But the surveillance footage showed him reading, slowly, methodically, entire volumes. She requested access to the footage. She watched him pause at a terminal, open a blank document, and begin to write. She captured the screen. The language was not English, not any known Earth dialect, but the structure was coherent, intentional. She ran it through linguistic modeling software. The results were inconclusive. She printed the fragment and pinned it to her wall. She began to suspect. Not that he was dangerous, but that he was not from here. She returned to the plaza the next night. He was there, standing still, watching. She approached. "You're not a performer," she said. He turned. "You're not a monster either." He did not respond. She held out the printed fragment. "I read this," she said. "I think you're trying to say something." He looked at the page, then at her, then walked away. She watched him disappear into the crowd. She did not follow. She returned home and began to write, not a report, a record. Something was here, and it was worth watching. Chapter 10. Contact. Laura returned to the plaza the next evening. She had reviewed the footage again, frame by frame, analyzing posture, gait, micro-movements. The figure she had encountered was not performing. He was observing. His silence was not theatrical. It was functional. She carried a small recorder and a printed transcript of the fragment she had captured from the library terminal. She had run it through every linguistic model she could access. The syntax was alien. The structure was deliberate. It was not a code. It was a statement. She waited. He arrived just after sunset. Same posture, same silence, same precision. She approached slowly, recorder in hand. "I don't want to expose you," she said. "I just want to understand." He turned toward her. "I think you were sent here," she continued. "But something went wrong. You weren't supposed to look like this." He remained still. "I read your writing. It's not human, but it's trying to be." She held out the transcript. He took it. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her. His eyes adjusted. His neural interface recalibrated. Her presence triggered a new protocol, interpretive engagement. He spoke. "My observation is complete. Mission parameters have been terminated." His voice was low, modulated, precise. Laura stepped back, startled. "You're not from this planet?" "No." "Why are you still here?" "Extraction was aborted. The fleet withdrawn." She stared at him. "You were abandoned?" "Yes." She lowered the recorder. "What happens now?" Varloff paused. "I adapt or I don't survive." He handed her back the transcript. "If you read this, you understood. I tried. You recognized me." "I did." He turned away. She didn't follow, but she knew the threshold had shifted. He was no longer a myth. He was no longer invisible. He had been seen, and Earth would not forget. Chapter 11. Withdrawal. Recognition had consequences. Varloff reviewed the plaza footage from the previous night. The civilian, Laura Reynolds, had approached without fear, without deception. She had spoken clearly. She had seen him, and she had understood enough to ask the right questions. That was the threshold. Once seen, he could not remain. His systems flagged the risk: exposure, escalation, containment. Earth's governments were fragmented, but their response to anomalies was consistent. Observe, isolate, neutralize. He had studied their protocols. He had watched their patterns. Recognition would trigger pursuit. He initiated withdrawal. Urban concealment was no longer viable, civilian density too high, surveillance saturation too complete. He mapped the region's terrain and identified a forested zone 70 kilometers north. Low population, minimal infrastructure, dense canopy. It would provide cover. It would allow silence. He moved at night. No vehicles, no signals, no trace. By dawn, he reached the edge of the forest. The trees were tall, ancient, saturated with moisture. The ground was uneven, layered with decay. He entered without hesitation. His systems adjusted: thermal masking, acoustic dampening, visual distortion. He became a shadow. He found shelter beneath a rock overhang and powered down non-essential modules. His neural interface remained active, scanning for signals, monitoring frequencies. None came. The fleet was silent. Command was gone. Earth was watching. He was no longer an operative. He was a fugitive. He reviewed his internal archive. The Shelley file remained. He opened it again. The creature had fled into the wilderness. It had sought solitude. It had feared pursuit. Varloff understood. He was not the creature, but he had inherited its silence. He began to write again. Not for command, for record, for memory, for whatever might come next. Chapter 12. Sanctuary. The forest did not ask questions. It did not scan his body for anomalies, did not interpret his silence as threat, did not recoil from the bolts in his neck or the uneven symmetry of his face. It accepted him without condition, without fear. Varloff moved through the undergrowth with calibrated precision, his systems adjusting to the terrain. He mapped the contours of the land, the density of foliage, the movement of water. He catalogued the sounds: wind through pine, the distant call of birds, the rustle of unseen creatures. He built shelter beneath a granite outcrop, reinforced with fallen branches and layered moss. It was stable, concealed, and dry. He no longer required tactical concealment, but instinct remained. He was not hunted, but he was not ready to be found. Days passed. His systems remained active, but his interface quieted. No transmissions, no surveillance, no pursuit. The silence was complete. He began to observe, not for intelligence, for understanding. A fox approached one morning, cautious but curious. Varloff remained still. The fox sniffed the air, circled, then vanished into the trees. The next day it returned. This time it stayed longer. A raven landed nearby, watching him with black eyes. Varloff recorded its vocalizations, its flight patterns, its behavior. It returned each morning, perching on the same branch, silent. A deer passed through the clearing at dusk, pausing to drink from the stream. Varloff watched without movement. The deer did not flee. He was no longer alone. The forest had accepted him. He began to walk without scanning, to sit without recording, to listen without interpreting. His systems remained intact, but his purpose had shifted. He was no longer an operative, no longer a fugitive. He was a witness to a world that did not need him to explain itself. He relished the quiet, the absence of distortion, the presence of life. He wrote again, fragments, reflections, observations, not for command, not for Laura, for himself, for memory, for the possibility that someone, someday, might read and understand. He was not the creature. He was not the spy. He was something else, and the forest did not ask him to decide. Chapter 13. The Wilderness of Thought. Winter came slowly. The forest thickened with silence, its canopy shedding color, its ground hardening beneath frost. Varloff moved less. His systems adjusted to conserve energy. The animals still came, less frequently, more cautiously. The raven perched in the same place each morning. The fox circled his shelter, leaving no tracks. The deer passed at dusk, silent as breath. He no longer recorded them. He no longer scanned the sky for signals. He no longer waited. His shelter had become a home, not by design, but by duration. The walls were reinforced with stone, the roof layered with bark and moss. Inside he kept fragments, leaves, feathers, bones, not for study, for memory. He wrote each day, not reports, not logs, reflections, observations, questions. He filled pages with symbols, sketches, and reconstructed language. He wrote of dissent, of distortion, of silence. He wrote of Laura, of recognition, of the moment he was seen. He wrote of the forest, of the way it did not ask him to explain. He did not know if anyone would read it. But he wrote anyway. One morning he woke to find the raven gone. The fox did not return. The deer did not pass. The forest was still. He stepped outside and scanned the horizon. No movement, no sound. Then he saw it, a figure at the edge of the trees, human, alone, watching. He did not move. The figure stepped forward, slowly, cautiously. It was Laura. She carried no recorder, no questions, only a satchel. She stopped a few meters away. "I found your new writings," she said. He nodded. "I think others will too." He said nothing. "I won't tell them where you are." He looked at her. "I just wanted to say, you're not a monster." She placed the satchel on the ground and stepped back. Inside were pages, his pages, preserved, transcribed, bound. She turned and walked away. He did not follow. He returned to his shelter and opened the satchel. His words stared back at him, clean, clear, intact, not as data, as story. He sat in silence. Outside, the forest shifted. Above, the sky remained empty. He was no longer Varloff of Dresde Prime. He was no longer the spy, no longer part of a larger plan. He was alone in the wilderness, and he was the echo of his own thoughts, and the echo would remain. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.